It is part two of our At Home with the Who's conversation with former Wahoo and Dallas Mavericks head coach Rick Carlisle. It's presented by Red Diamond Iced Tea. And, Coach, let's get back to it. Give me your fondest memory from those years you spent playing your time at UVA.
Well, I would just have to say the overall experience of, first of all, being able to play with Ralph for a year. That was amazing. I mean, that was phenomenal. When I transferred there to UVA in the spring of 1981, Ralph was ending his sophomore year. They'd come off the Final Four with Lamp and Breaker and Ralph and, Jeff Jones and Othell and Ricky and those guys. But I never dreamed that Ralph would be there beyond his junior year, because I was going to be sitting out a year and not playing because I transferred. And so, I go into my junior year and become eligible and, playing with Ralph Sampson. It's just, it's amazing experience where you go from the University of Maine where, it's just a different situation. You're playing in the ECAC North, very, very few games are ever on TV. And now every single game's on national TV. And it's just, the level of competition is the absolute highest. So, it was a dream situation for me. We had a great year. We fell short of the championship, but it was still just a phenomenal thing. And to be, have your first year eligible, being able to go through those kinds of things and have that kind of experience with a player like Ralph was just, beyond words, really.
Yeah, maybe I'm burying the lead here, but I mentioned you played with the great Ralph Sampson, but you also lived with the great Jimmy Miller. I can only imagine what that experience must have been like.
Well, Miller and Mullen and myself lived together. We became very, very close. We had an apartment over at U Heights, and Jim Miller's an accomplished guy. I mean, he was a great basketball player. He's an accomplished magician, which I'm sure, you've had the card tricks and
Oh, I've seen it all. Not all of it, but some of it.
All that stuff. Andy's become very successful in his money managing business. And now he's a successful broadcaster riding your coattails. So he's been a lucky guy.
Former Virginia standout Jenny Boucek, who you named as the Mavericks' first ever female assistant coach 2 years ago. What's that working relationship been like?
Well, I've known Jenny for probably 10 or 12 years now. She came down and spent an entire month with us probably 5 years ago because she wanted to see how an NBA team put together a defense and offense and all that stuff. And she was kind of between jobs. And then she ended up getting the head coaching job with the Seattle Storm almost immediately. And I know she used a lot of the stuff that we were doing with her Storm teams, which were really elite offensive teams. I've loved Jenny's, intellectual curiosity for the game. She was a great player. She was an intense competitor. Her teams in the WNBA have always been elite offensive teams. And, we've had very good offensive teams here in Dallas. And I thought that bringing her creativity and fertile mind would be a good thing. And she's been great. And she's become a mom, and she's got a daughter named Riley. And so in year 2, she's doing fantastic.
That's great. All right. So as we wind things down in our conversation, I got to ask you the question that I ask all UVA basketball alumni. And I know you've been to the pinnacle of the NBA as both a player and a coach, but what was the experience like for you to watch your alma mater cut down the nets for the first time as national champions last year?
Yeah, it was so great. And, Tony Bennett has become, as I mentioned, a close friend over the last several years. I've spent time with him down there. We've talked basketball a lot. We've talked philosophy, and a lot of those kinds of things. And, when they got into the tournament and they started to win games, which I was sure that they were going to do, But then they came to the ending of it, and those last 3 games, I mean, you know, they virtually in the last 3 games, it looked like it was over, and they somehow found a way. It was a phenomenal run, a super special team, and you know, I know all those guys going to the NBA. You know, it's kind of put them in a little bit into a rebuild. Although I know they were doing way better than expected this past year. And from that standpoint, I know it must have been very disappointing that the season kind of came to a halt. But watching those guys cut down the nets and everything else was, you know, was a real thrill.
All right, Coach. Well, it is time for our lightning round of questions, and here we go. All right. As we talk about all these memories, your favorite player game at UVA was what?
Ralph Sampson hitting a buzzer beater at his last home game against Maryland. So Ralph's last home game turned into this huge celebration, but it didn't look so good. So that one for sure.
Yep, I just got to listen to that one. We replayed that broadcast on the radio just last weekend. Your all-time favorite UVA athlete is or was?
Oh, Ralph Sampson. Yeah, not even close. Not even close. I mean, look, there's a lot of great players and I got a lot of great friends, but you know, Ralph's in the Naismith Hall of Fame, not only because he was a great NBA player, but because he was 3-time National Player of the Year in college. And you know, you just can't duplicate those kinds of accomplishments. And plus, he's remained a very good friend, and you know, I really enjoy keeping in touch with him too.
Your favorite place on grounds?
Old Cabell Hall, where they had all the pianos. Because when I transferred to Virginia, that was when I decided to take on learning the piano. I knew I was going to be sitting out a year and not playing games, and I wanted to immerse myself in some other activity. I was going to be able to practice with the team, but not playing games was going to be a real big challenge. And so, you know, I found an old piano in someone's barn, got it delivered over to Lambeth Field. You know, I was in an apartment there. Luckily, it was a ground floor apartment. Got it fixed up, and I just started grinding away.
That's it with the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. That is one Rick Carlisle.